Recording now. So have you got the line, guys?
Sorry?
You got the line now?
Well,
It's got a big zoom screen,
yeah, it's got a big zoom in the middle.
big logo.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah.
Better. Perfect.
I can't see what I'm sharing, you see, which is a bit unfortunate.
Really?
No.
It's got all your bank account details on there.
Yeah. Well, that won't be much good for you. Anyway, good afternoon, guys. What we're going to do today is we're going to do Rule 19. But before we get into that, Rule 19 is restricted visibility. But we'll just remind ourselves of the definition of restricted visibility. So this comes from Rule 3, which is the definition. So we did do it a couple of weeks ago. But restricted visibility means any condition which visibility is restricted: fog, mist, falling snow, heavy rainstorms, sandstorms, or other similar causes. So it's not just fog. Does that make sense? So you should consider how you're navigating and thinking. If your visibility is reduced to the extent that you find it difficult to see other vessels, then you're in restricted visibility, and these rules apply. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
This rule applies to vessels not in sight of one another when navigating in or near an area of restricted visibility. So the picture is of a fog bank. So it's quite possible, and I've been in this situation in the Solent, where you're sitting in gin clear conditions and you can see half a mile away a fog bank, and you know that there are vessels operating in a fog bank. In that case, you have to operate as though you're in restricted visibility, because clearly you can't see them and they can't see you. And more importantly, they don't know the extent of their visibility or how long that they're going to be. So they're manoeuvring and taking action as though the area of restricted visibility is everywhere. Does that make sense? If you can imagine being in fog yourself, you don't know that maybe 100 yards away you're going to come into clear air. So you'll be taking action based on the information you've got. So sound signals, if you can hear them, or your radar picture, you're going to assume that everything around you is also in poor visibility. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if you're close to a fog bank or close to a big squall or something like that, then assume that you're in restricted visibility. Every vessel shall proceed at a safe speed adapted to the prevailing circumstances and conditions of restricted visibility. A power-driven vessel shall have her engines ready for immediate manoeuvre. We discussed this a little bit when we were talking about the rule safe speed. And I remember talking about what's the stopping distance for a 36-foot yacht, and it really doesn't change significantly in terms of 6 knots, your stopping distance is 1 or 2 boat lengths, and at 2 knots, it's half a boat length. So we're reducing our stopping distance from 40 foot to 8 foot, which is a big relative change, but actually, in terms of how far we can see and why we slow down, it's not a massive difference. But conversely, the graph that I've put up on the screen here is for a laden tanker, and you can see that when he's going at full speed, his stopping distance is about 2 miles. And you can see that by coming down to half speed or half ahead, so about 8 knots, then he's reduced that by half. So he's given himself an extra mile. And you can see why this reduction in speed for a big merchantman makes a difference, because suddenly you're going to have if your range of visibility is only a mile, being able to stop within a mile makes more sense than being able to stop within 2 miles. So you can see why this rule is much more important for big ships to comply with, and why when ships have their logs examined after an incident, one of the things they look at is what the visibility was and what speed the ship was going at, because you very quickly get an idea of how prudent the captain or the officer watches were on that ship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could you just explain that track reach little graph, Mike?
Sorry?
Could you just explain, please, that little graph
Yeah, sure.
or table? Track reach.
Okay, so what it says here, so it's explaining, so at this point, if you're going from slow ahead, so basically that's equivalent, slow ahead on a would be our equivalent of just the engine just engaged and tick over.
Yeah.
So you may be going 4 or 5 knots. It will take you, he's saying that stopping distance is about 2/3 of a mile.
So that's 2 miles, the index in the middle.
Yeah.
Got it.
Half
The
ahead
axis.
to slow ahead, it's about half of that, a mile.
Okay.
And full ahead to stopped is about 2 miles. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
So the actual distances that they're giving themselves are massive compared to the distance. 12 feet or 20 feet of extra visibility doesn't make much difference to us. Whereas a mile of extra thinking time and extra stopping time makes a huge difference when you're a big ship. Does that make sense? And then the second part of this rule says a power-driven vessel should have engines ready for immediate manoeuvre. What this is getting at is a lot of ships have got more than one engine, and and the ship is more manoeuvrable when both engines are engaged, either because it has more power. So if you've got 2 engines onto one shaft and you go to full astern, you've got more stopping power. Or if you've got displaced engines, so you've got 2 engines either side of the hull, or 2 propellers either side of the hull, each driven by an engine, then you can manoeuvre and turn more easily. Does that make sense? So conversely, a lot of ships travel around routinely running on only one engine at what would be known as economical speed, because you're using half the amount of fuel. And what the rules are saying here is when you're in reduced visibility, you need to have both engines ready for immediate manoeuvre. So sod the economics of it, make sure that you're as manoeuvrable as you can. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So
But
it doesn't
just
to us too much as yachtsmen.
Oh.
Sorry?
I just wanted to ask a question, if I may, about that
Go on.
power-driven vessel bit. It doesn't then suggest that a sailing yacht, which has engines, or an engine rather, should have its engine running in case of need.
Well, I think it probably does. So it's not explicit, but the implication from this is when we're operating in or near restricted visibility, we should take into account what we can do to make the boat more manoeuvrable. So it would be remiss not to have our engine ready to run. So does that mean that it needs to be on and ticking over? I think it depends on how your engine starts. So if your engine starts pretty much immediately and you've got a start button next to the helm, then really the 2 or 3, 4, 5 seconds that it's going to take you to start your engine's probably not going to make a big difference in the scheme of things. If you've got an engine which you need to crank up and warm through before it runs properly, so it's a 2-minute process, then you probably should have it running and primed, or at least warmed up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And you have to balance that against what would be the problem by having an engine running in a cockpit of a yacht? Maybe
You can't hear things that you would otherwise hear.
Reduce your you reduce your awareness. But what I would say more specifically, rather than having your engine ready in a yacht, you should think about your sail plan. So, is it sensible to be flying a spinnaker, or have your genoa poled out, or what is your setup and how are your crew ready to respond? If you're running downwind and you've got your your boom prevented out, how's that all going to work? What are the implications of that for your maneuverability and your ability to change to a rapidly changing situation? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Whilst we don't have another engine to put on, we do have things that we can do which can make us more manoeuvrable and responsive to the situation. Happy?
Yeah.
Every vessel shall have due regard to the prevailing circumstances and conditions of restricted visibility when complying with the rules of Section 1 of this part. Section 1 of this part is just a reminder. It's lookout, safe speed, narrow channels, traffic separation scheme, risk of collision, etc. So the stuff we were doing a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, are all in Rule 1 of these parts. And if you remember, a lot of those rules had the terms prevailing circumstances and conditions. And what this part of the rule is saying, absolutely be thoughtful and cognizant of what the implications of the visibility are on how you're applying the rule. So when you're considering how many lookouts you have, or when you're considering safe speed, or how you approach operating in a narrow channel, or what risk of collision is, be considerate of the state of visibility. Happy?
Yeah.
It's common sense, but it's there in black and white. This is the nuts and bolts part D of the restricted visibility. Everything else we've talked about is common sense, isn't it? So it's saying that part 1 says consider the rules apply when in or near. Part 2 says have you adapt your speed sensibly. Part 3 says consider the circumstance of visibility generally when you're doing everything. And now it's talking about what you should do when you detect by radar alone the presence of another vessel. And this part of the rule is fairly straightforward, but it can be quite complicated. And I will always go and look it up as soon as I start to think about the boat being in or close to restricted visibility, because I just want to make sure that I've got it right in my own head, because it's straightforward, but it would be an easy thing to get 180 degrees wrong and then make a mistake. So just to be clear, you need to know it, but I always check it anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A vessel which detects by radar alone the presence of another vessel shall determine if a close quarters situation is developing. So that's what we'd do normally. So this is the equivalent of spotting a vessel, taking a bearing, but we're going to check whether a close quarters situation is developing. Such a situation will exist if the vessel is on a steady bearing. So if we look at the diagram on the top right-hand corner here, we can see vessel B. The little yellow line is its projected course, and you can see effectively they're on a steady bearing. We're at the center of the radar screen. If we carry on, that boat's going to come in and pass very close to us, isn't it? Equally, vessel D is going to pass close down our port side. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If a close quarters situation exists, the vessel shall take avoiding action in ample time, provided that action consists of an alteration, where such action consists of an alteration of course, the following should be avoided.
There's a different chart, Mike. Are we looking at the wrong chart here or not?
You should have...
we've got different words to you, that's all.
You should have a target in the right-hand corner.
Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah, I think I was contextualizing the words.
Oh, fine. Sorry.
Yeah. They're brought. Yeah. Okay, so So as long as the following is avoided: an alteration of course to port for a vessel forward of the beam. So other than for a vessel being overtaken. So the reason being is if this vessel decides that he would normally alter course to starboard. So if he alters course to starboard, and we alter course to port, we can continue to have a situation. So basically, any vessel forward of the beam, we don't alter course to port unless we've already identified that we're overtaking. Does that make sense? So if we had a vessel coming down along this track here, we could clearly identify we're overtaking it. It would be okay to alter course to port. But generally, the vessel forward of the beam, so in this quadrant here, you don't alter course to port, you alter course to starboard. Does that make sense? And then for a vessel approaching you from abaft the beam, you avoid an alteration of course towards. So this quarter, so the port quarter, this area here, you don't alter course to port. And this quarter, you don't alter course to starboard.
Oof.
Does that make sense? No?
Not
yet.
It tells you what not to do.
So
I can understand the two in the forward quadrants. That sort of half makes sense.
well, if I'm tracking up here, if another vessel's tracking up here,
Ah,
and he alter course to port, you're going to increase the risk of collision, aren't you?
yeah,
And if you've got a vessel tracking up here and he alters course to starboard, you're going to increase the risk of collision.
yeah.
Read his nautical landmark that keeps it simple. It says with radar, I've got it here, but it says always turn to starboard unless it's on your starboard quarter when you turn to port.
That was about what I was going to get onto. So this is what the rules say and why I always look it up. So this area here, forward of the beam and on the port quarter, it says don't alter course to port. So conversely, you should generally alter course to starboard. This quarter here, you should alter course to port.
Right.
Now the subtlety, why the rule's written like that, is because except where it's been determined that risk of collision does not exist, every vessel which hears apparently forward of a beam the fog signal of another which cannot avoid a close quarter situation shall reduce her speed to minimum at which she can be kept on course. She shall, if necessary, take all way off and in any event navigate with extreme caution. So prior to the introduction of radar at sea, the action to take in the event of a risk of collision and restricted visibility is to slow down or stop. So what the reason the rule was written that way is what they want to do is they don't want to throw that idea out. And it's the one rule which I don't think has been particularly well explained or well written. So, and hence I have to always look it up because it's not entirely intuitive. So it's saying don't alter course to port, but what it's not saying is you should alter course to starboard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because you might just want to keep going straight ahead or slow down.
Or slow down or stop.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Can you bear with me a second?
Yeah.
So it was the doorbell, and I wasn't sure whether my wife was able to answer the door or not. So cool. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah. If you've got a boat coming up on you in the starboard quarter, is it called, the back?
Starboard quarter. So this area here.
Yeah. Why? I mean, it's suggesting here that you. No, it's saying no. It's not suggesting you move, is it? That's the good thing about the rule. Yeah.
It's saying don't alter course towards it.
Yeah. So but you could. I was going to ask. Why should you worry about if it's the guy behind you? I suppose you have to worry because in bad visibility, he may not be able to see you.
Well, it's not.
Radar.
You have to make some deductions when you're observing a vessel on radar as to what he's actually doing.
Yeah.
Because all you've got is a dot moving across the screen. You can't, and that's a relative movement as opposed to an actual movement. Does that make sense? So whilst you can deduce what he's doing, because if you know your own course and speed, it can be confusing.
Yeah.
Presumably, if in almost any circumstance, a sort of reasonably significant change in speed is going to mean that the vessel is no longer on a steady bearing anyway, wherever it's coming from.
It should do, yeah.
So that would probably be your first recourse, right? Rather than an alteration of course, is first slow down, and if that doesn't help, then change course.
As long as you're not slowing down or stopping in front of him.
Well, yes, but if you did slow down or stop in front of them, they would still be on a steady bearing, in fact, wouldn't they? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Happy days. But as I say, this is written in a slightly confusing way. It's not entirely intuitive, and I go back and read it every time I get anywhere near
Very wise.
I think I might need to apply it. Other stuff though. So this is we've talked about what the rules say about operating in restricted visibility, and to be honest, I think it's quite a technical rule. It's a lot of it's referring about how you operate and how you make a decision about how you operate with a contact on radar. But there are some important things that we also need to consider as yachtsmen operating in restricted visibility, which are perhaps even more important. Now, I've got some clues to them up here, so let's see how many of you can get my slightly tenuous clues. Who wants to have a shot at one of these?
Sorry, what's the question?
Other stuff we would do as yachtsmen when operating in or near restricted visibility.
Oh, right, okay.
Remember to look at the depth. Is that a shallow on the top left?
It is shallow water. And you should always remember to look at the depth. All the time you should be aware of what depth of water in. But what might I be suggesting with shallow water?
Echo sounder.
Use it to navigate. Stay out of the deep water for the bigger ships.
Stay out of the deep water, yeah. So if you can go and put the boat in shallow water, you're not going to be at such risk of being hit by a large vessel, yeah? And what else can you do in shallow water?
Anchor.
So you're now making the problem easier for yourself in some respects. So you're not moving around and you're out of the danger of being hit by a very large ship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. What about the next slide? So next one down on the left, and I'll give you a clue. I'm not talking about a risk of icebergs.
I think you are, Mike. I can see them in the back.
There's icebergs in the picture. That's what I'm looking at. That's not what my clue's there for.
Okay.
No men with moustaches on the boat.
Look behind as well as
it's a
all
lookout
around.
thing.
No.
Yeah.
And make sure people are wearing safety gear.
That is one of them, but so life jackets is definitely a precaution you should be taking. But my other clues was for that. What was that, Anna?
Visibility because of sun without sunglasses.
No, it's not that.
Extra lookouts.
Extra lookouts is something you should do. I think that's covered in the rules, though.
Submerged objects.
No.
Don't take selfies.
No. Who's ever been on a boat in fog?
It doesn't look like that, I'll tell you.
Is it? What's it like?
It's foggy.
Scary.
Oh, cold.
It's cold and miserable, and you need to make sure your crew are properly dressed up, because if they're getting damp and cold, then they're not able to do the job that they need. I told you they were subtle. Next one down on the left.
Listen.
Yeah, listen, and maybe beware of what?
Fails.
Yeah. Great words.
Foghorns.
So actually on big ships, you do, the lookouts get posted on the upper deck, and the big ship's foghorn is so loud that you need to wear ear protection to physically protect your ears from it.
Right.
And they have these, they're quite common now, but when I was, so in the late 80s, early 90s, I was given these as a fog lookout, and they had batteries in them, and they actually had electronic filters, so they they defended your ears from the loud sound close to you, but they amplified the same frequencies which were coming from distance. So beware of the damaging your ears from foghorns. If you, I'm thinking of something subtler here.
Listen out for bells, and sound travels quite well over water, so it's quite hard to judge how far or near any buoys might be that have got bells and signals.
Yeah, it
Local
is. And
navigation.
actually, what I googled here for that picture was beware of engine noise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Top right.
Log your position.
Sorry,
Log your position frequently.
it's not actually a log, but yeah, fix your position when you're approaching poor visibility. Yeah.
Is that a record of other vessels?
No, it's not.
No, I can't read what it is.
No.
Okay, it's a watch bill.
What is it?
It's a watch bill. So be prepared that you're going to be in this situation for a while. Sea fog in particular can persist, and you can spend 24, 36, 48 hours in sea fog. And you need more lookouts and more people working your radar, etc. And you've probably only got a few people, but you need to think about how you're going to do that and how you're going to maintain that for a long period of time and how you're going to rest people, because you can't keep everyone going the whole time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, the middle one on the right.
You don't want to lose a man overboard because you won't be able to see them. So make sure people attach carefully or careful.
Perfect, Anna. And bottom right.
That's really interesting because I remember being taught that actually you unclip people so they don't go down with the yacht.
Ah. Excuse me. I think you've been, I think somebody who was teaching you's kind of forgotten or misconstrued or mislearned something along the way there. But
years ago.
Yeah, I think if you get hit, you're having a bad day. But the more likely thing would be that somebody falls over the side. And if you can imagine doing a man overboard when you can't actually see the person,
scary.
That would be quite difficult.
Okay.
So I would, as always, it always depends on exactly what the situation is. But I would try and avoid being hit, and this is avoiding people falling over the side, which is a fairly likely and unpleasant experience if you're parading with fog. A man overboard in fog would be quite scary, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay, bottom right.
Don't know.
Don't go out in it.
Yeah, perfect. Who was that? Yeah. So don't go out in fog. If it's forecast, don't go out. It's unpleasant. It's dangerous, and it will disappear, and you have a better day sailing another day. Happy days, guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Any questions?
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Cheers,
Thank you very
mate.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
again.
Bye.
Bye.